What's up? So today I'm going to be going through some thoughts that I've been having. So prior to me leaving, I had a lot of times when I just went through a lot of self-doubt, and that's the theme that comes up a lot in my journaling. So before I get into it, I think it's just good to know where or how I do this. So this is my notebook. I carry it everywhere I go. It always changes. It's literally whatever notebook. I've never really ever bought one. Actually, I have, but yeah, I carry it. I write through it, and then it just goes in with the rest of them. So I've got a stack of these at home. Yeah. So how I usually do this is from front to back. That's where I have my notes. So you see any sort of ideas that I have, I'll write from front to back. But then whenever the inspiration hits me to journal or to write down a more of a reflective thought, I'll take it and go to the back and I flip it upside down. And that's generally where I then write it's where all my journaling happens. So I'm looking at the first page, right? And I don't know how I'm gonna do this, but I'm just gonna pick ideas from just what I might have been going through on the day. This was still quite early on when I was just writing. So what I would do is I just start writing and I just make sure I finish a page. So how it is now is each page is a thought on a separate day. There's maybe 2 or 3 times when I journal twice a day. Those were days when I either had the time or I felt I really needed to. So this first entry was sort of what I explained in the first video that I did, where I was in 2 minds or multiple minds of thought, where I knew I wasn't necessarily where I wanted to be, but to get out of that, there was something holding me back from that. And it was mental chess, right? All these ideas that I had swirling around my head came from me. It was literally me just not knowing what to do next. So I opened it by saying I definitely need to back myself more, right? And follow my gut. And I think that it's something I think a lot of us don't we know we need to do it, and you get that feeling inside where you're like, hey man, maybe this is the sign. We always ask for signs. Maybe this is the sign. Maybe because there was a lot that was going on. I remember around about this time there was a lot that was happening around me, and in the clinics around me I was like, yo, this is enough of a sign. I even told people, I'm like, this is, if I needed a more clearer sign, this is it. So there was that thought, but then there was still the thought of, this is risky, don't leave your work. Where you are, things might be bad for the moment, but the moment will pass and things will get better. And that was me just covering it up. I would just bury those feelings, and then it wouldn't push me on to the next day. Even after writing this, I'm sure I probably felt better for a couple of minutes, and then the next bad thing happens or the next thing happens. I'm just like, yo, that's why I felt that way. And I sort of keep going back to that reference point of being down and being not really wanting to be where I was. So I then made a note that the only reason I am where I am is because of me. I'm responsible for my own choices. Knowing that I'm secure in my abilities is clearly not enough. So knowing that I've left my job before, I've done this before, I have survived before, I have a plan, I've got savings, I have backup plans to those plans. Literally everything was set, and I have a degree. I've got a master's degree, just there, waiting, ready to kick in whenever I need to. Having all of those things in place didn't help. Honestly, it didn't help me it didn't make the decision any easier. I was speaking with a friend, and I'd said that I'd set myself a financial goal to say that I'm going to make a certain amount of money and then I'm going to leave my job. That amount of money just kept on doing this. Every time I'd reach that goal, I'd be like, hey, but that's probably not enough. Let me add another 50K. Well, let me add this much. Well, let me do this. Under these conditions, this is going to happen. So I just kept on doing that and doing that and doing that, and to a point where I was just like, yo, what's going on? Then, what's funny, my brain works in a funny way, is that I'll take some of those savings and say, you know what, I actually need to invest in the studio. So what that would do is that it would deplete some of the money that I had. Therefore, I then had to work even harder to reach those very same goals that I'd set for myself. So it was almost like a self-sabotage to keep me in that same sort of that same loop that I was working in. Thinking about it now, it sounds very stupid. When I put it like that, it sounds very stupid. But when you're in it, you justify it so quickly and so easily. Let's see what else. I'm not going to mention everything because some of these thoughts are stupid and dark. But okay, then I mentioned that some days are better than others. That's life. But it was becoming very apparent that I would have good days and I'd have really bad days. Usually it was just a sort of a middle, sort of okay medium. And if it was good, it was good. If it was bad, it wasn't too bad. But it was becoming quite bad, and I was noticing it more and more and more, speaking about it more and more, and I could feel like I was affecting the people around me. I might have even left some people some ideas, planting seeds of, man, this is actually not the greatest place. Getting them to see things from my perspective when I didn't really have to do it. But I figure these are adults, right? I'm dealing with adults, so if I say something and those are my viewpoints, I expect them to be taken as such. And that if someone's feelings are different, they've got their own viewpoint, right? I was just voicing mine, and we can have a very healthy conversation about it. So, yeah. This is an interesting one. The mood of the day also depends on how well the business is going, and this was a big thing. In fact, it got me this past week now, even as well, where I'll wake up in the morning and I'll have energy to do stuff throughout the day, and I'll either see where I am in the month. It's the halfway point of the month, and I'll see that I haven't made much in terms of revenue, and I'll be like, man, you see, had I not had a job, I would have been screwed this month, and that's why I should stay in my job. Or I've got 15 days left to try and catch the same amount of money that I made last month, when it's very apparent in business that you can't compare month to month. If you do that, you're like, hey man, I didn't make as much money as last month. You're gonna have a headache because every month is different. There's gonna be months that are gonna be bumper months where you're gonna earn 4 or 5 times the amount of money that you would have usually earned, but there's gonna be months where you walk away with close to nothing. And sometimes it might be at no fault of your own. You might just have a life circumstance that happens that stops you, prevents you from being able to generate as much income as you might have wanted to that month. So yeah, my feeling was very, very reliant, and is sort of very reliant on that now, even still. And it's not easy to get away from. I've sort of, I think me having done this before and knowing how a business ebbs and flows and having a sort of a trend for a year, it makes things a little bit easier, because now I know, December, even if it does slow down a bit, I'm not gonna get sad. But that's even worse, because now when it's like Black Friday time, or when it's like winter time, which is usually just, it peaks a little bit in like June, July. If it doesn't do that according to my trends over the past 3 years, then I start to question and wonder why. So you see how every reason can be a good thing, but can also be a bad thing. Just being conscious of that information. I even highlighted here that there were times when I quit my job the last time that I remember waking up at like 3 a.m. Randomly, I'd wake up at 3 a.m. My body would wake me up at 3 a.m. I look at the time, I'm like, yo, this is weird. Because I didn't have anywhere to be the next day. It was literally me making beats. But then my mind would start thinking like, yo man, the reason why you woke up now is probably because right now you're not financially stable. And for you to get there, you either need to work now, think about how badly things are going, or just wallow, just stew in all of this. And then I'll wake up the next day and I wouldn't have as much energy. But there were times that actually did help me. Like waking up in the middle of the night and writing down a couple of notes actually helped me then the next day to be able to get through that day a lot better. Okay. Alright, then I made a note that I know now I am better in terms of my ability. I am better now than I was a couple of years ago. So even there alone, I have progressed further in terms of my capabilities and just everything that I'm dealing with at the moment. I've got a studio now. I didn't really have a separate studio offsite beforehand. There's parts of my business that are now doing way better than they were back then. So there was evidence to say that should I try to quit my job, it should be easier. It should, in theory, everything is there, it's set up as easier. But then at the same point, when I quit my job the last time, I didn't have a child. I wasn't married. Things like that should have made it easier. And now it's kind of like, what are you thinking? You have all of these things in place. Why would you do something so risky at such a time? But that one I was able to dampen down, because I knew that if not now, then when? Because second child, third child, fourth child, I've got all these other things that start to pop up. One house, two house, maybe something happens in the family, then the next thing happens. So one thing I can appreciate is that things don't get easier. You don't get to a place where things are chill. I think things are probably the easiest when you are maybe like in university, because you don't have the burden and stress of school and that schedule. In some degrees. But then at the same time, you don't have the weight of like just being a taxpayer, having a job, 9 to 5, responsibilities, KPIs, all these things that you need to hit. You're kind of like in the middle of it, but that's usually the time when you're just out doing whatever. So it's weird how that happens. Anyway, I noted again, it's a risky move. No amount of security will make me feel totally safe, but I have to try. And then it was just me trying to just pep myself up and feel better about the decision that I wanted to make. But like I said, there's a lot of self-doubt, and I mean it's still there now. I can't say that it's completely pushed away, and I can imagine that someone who's even in there, I don't know what sort of evidence needs to pop up for that to be completely squashed. But thinking about it now, all the little things that I have achieved, I'm like, but that didn't really help anything. Didn't make the self-doubt go away. The skills might be there, the skills might be improving, but the self-doubt is still there. The studio looks better, the self-doubt is still there. So I don't know. I think it's something I need to dive into more. I've got a lot more entries where I talk about it, and it's sort of like, the more I speak about it, the more I'm able to identify it, the more I'm able to give it a name and box it off and say, okay, there's that thing again. It's rearing its ugly head. I know what it is. I just need to put it over there, or I need to deal with it and move past it, because it's okay when it's there, because it sort of keeps me awake and it keeps me trying to improve myself, because I'm like, hey, am I good enough? Let me go practice that thing a little bit more. But at the same time, I don't want it to get in the way, in that you feel it and then it makes you sort of like retreat, and you're like, hey, maybe I shouldn't do it because I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not the person that I think I am. Therefore, the thing that I'm trying to do is actually not going to work, if that makes sense. So, yeah, that was the thought on that day. That was interesting to go through. I actually haven't read through one of these ever before. I've just been writing this entire time. So I'm curious to see how it's very meta, but how me speaking about what I'm writing about is going to affect how I write, if that makes sense. So, but that will only be able to figure out many, many months from now, because there's a lot of stuff to go through in here. But yeah, I don't know. You might have had thoughts that are similar. I'd be very, very interested to know what goes through the mind. Going through the emotions, one thing, but the reasoning behind why you think you're going through that thing, that's what really, really fascinates me. So if you do something similar, let me know. The comments are there. You can, if you don't want to put it there, you can always just send me a text or give me a phone call. I'll be happy to set aside a couple of minutes, we just chat about it, or send me a voice note. So until the next one, peace.